Session Blood.
Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to Session Blood episode 33. And we've got a bit of an exciting episode today, I think.
Super excited to show you guys the latest spoiler for a Brute action card called Tear Limb from Limb. And I feel like right off the bat, I feel like as soon as you look at that picture, you know that this is definitely a Brute card. Like, whoever it is sitting on that pile is having a nice little munch. And it's very on theme with Brute, and I feel like it kind of fits with the Levia, the new hero, as well as the other Brutes as well.
Yeah, no, because you and I, we both played a bit of Brute in our time. Like, we're big fans of the class, and I always like seeing some Brute support. Now, the big thing that, kind of struck me immediately with this card is that it's a blue card. And I always feel that, blue cards are generally resource cards. So if you can have a blue card in your deck that actually does something, that's almost like an immediate win.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like, especially in Brute, it's a class that always struggled to find those useful Brutes. Useful blues. You have the Reckless Swing, which is a great finisher, and I think it's at the moment kind of seen as like the top level blue for Brute. You also have Sanskrit Plan and Rhinar, and obviously Recurromp. Actually, Recurromp is probably even better than Reckless Swing, you could argue, but I feel like, yeah, it's definitely a spot in the list that always kind of, the last few cards are quite hard to fill up, so it's really good to see a majestic level blue for Brute in general.
Yeah, I actually agree with that, because I feel like some of the baseline Brute blue cards, a bit of a tongue twister, right?
Yeah.
Are pretty good, because you've got like your Barraging Beatdowns, like you mentioned, you've got your Sand Sketch, your Reckless Swings.
Oh, yeah, of course, Barraging.
And
Yeah,
Wrecker
that's a
Romp,
good one.
like, Wrecker Romp, one of the best cards there is, it's got that 6 power, pitches with 3, blocks with 3. But once you get past those, then you're kind of like, you're going deep into the cupboard, you're scraping the barrel, be like, what else can I get in? I gotta get these blues, like... I mean, one option, I've seen some players play things like Potions, for example, and that does have its merits. But often I feel the prime sort of candidate for this card to take over would be something like either Blue Awakening Bellow or potentially even like a Blue Unmovable. I mentioned Blue Awakening Bellow because that card, well, whilst it is like quite a good impactful blue, it can be that last Intimidate you need, it is kind of, I feel, compared to the other ones, a bit less impactful.
Absolutely. But I mean, the main difference is that it blocks for 3. You look at Tear Limb from Limb, and that's a massive deal for any Brute player. Like, particularly me as a player, I love cards that can actually block. So this is definitely something that threw me off at first when I saw that. But then you read the card, and the effect is actually extremely powerful when it goes off, right? So you draw a card and you discard a random card. If you discard something with 6 or more power, then your next Brute attack action card, it gets plus X, where X is its base power. So immediately when I saw that, I started thinking of cards that just hit for heaps, right? You have the Alpha Rampage is number 1, and it's a Rhino specialization, so this immediately strikes me as a great combination of cards for Rhino. But yeah, even on average, when you pump something that only attacks for 6, and you play this out, and it starts attacking for 12, like that's a pretty powerful effect for a blue. So
Yeah,
you can definitely see that kind of trade-off there.
Yeah, because when you put it onto cards like Pack Hunt as well, as a sort of classic example, it can be really good. And, another thing, how it can trigger your Mandible Claws if you're playing that build of Brood. So, an example of a turn where... Sorry, if you're playing that in Rhino. So, an example of a turn where you sort of open up, you maybe pitch a blue card and play Tear Limb from Limb. You get the effect from that, you trigger Intimidate from Rhino's ability, you potentially turn on your claws to come in for attacks. Combine that with the Barraging Beatdown, maybe like one big attack, and it actually starts to get quite exciting. Another thing is as well is like as a blue card, you mentioned it can't block, which is like definitely something that struck me as well. I remember looking at the card and being like, wow, this is insanely good, insanely good. Then I look down to the bottom right and I'm like, it appears to be misprinted. It's missing a block value, but
Something's missing from this area of the card. Yeah, yeah, I know what you
but
mean.
yeah, but then you see it doesn't block. But like we mentioned, there's multiple brute builds that have played things like Energy Potion and Timestamp Potion. While I'm aware that those are in there for very different reasons, in a way you can draw some sort of comparison. I feel like a thing like Energy Potion, the benefit of that is off a Scab Skin Leather's additional action point, you can play that out, without using up your entire turn. It lets you build up more
Yeah.
explosive turns later in the game. But that last point is something that this card also lets you do. Because for Tear Limb from
Yeah.
Limb, like, you're not going to be blocking with it. So if you're pitching it throughout the course of a game, it actually gives you that potential just last little bit of extra burst you need to drop someone down to, even drop them down to 3 or 4 life, put them reckless swing range. So I don't know. I feel like it's definitely something. If I was a Rhino player, I'd be experimenting with. Maybe not a full 3 copies. That seems a little bit YOLO. Like don't want to draw to
Just
the
draw three and you have a bad time.
yeah. But I really think 1 to 2 copies of this could really provide a significant advantage. And because the thing is with Brute as well, it feels sometimes that once you go through your big turns, you can sort of fizzle out a little bit towards the end game. So just having a blue card that gives you the option of one final big turn is pretty cool.
Yeah, I do think that you're right. Like you will find yourself pitching this throughout the early and mid game quite a bit. So I feel like it's one of these cards that make you kind of can punish you if you don't pay attention to your pitch. Basically, if you pitch this and pitch a bunch of other blues, you might have be setting yourself up for a pretty average turn in the late game. But if you do pay attention to your pitch and can actually kind of set up a big tier limb from limb turn, it can actually be that finisher that you need, especially with something in like Rhina where the discard is quite nice in the form of that intimidate. So one of the kind of coolest combinations, I guess, that I thought of is, especially in something like Blitz, you could Arsenal Alpha Rampage, have something like a hardened cross strap in as your chest piece, and basically wait till you draw that tier limb from limb. You pitch a blue, play this, discard. Hopefully you have enough cards in your hand that you can kind of make it quite reasonable that you do hit that 6 power discard, and all of a sudden your alpha rampage when you play it out, and because you're playing Rhino, you're getting that intimidate from Tear Limb from Limb, and then you're getting 2 more intimidates from alpha rampage that's attacking for 18. So like even just that combination of cards just show you how much of a power spike Rhina can get. So I'm talking about a lot about Rhina, but it's probably my favorite hero. So
Yeah,
just that combination kind of gives you, and it doesn't have to be your kind of main combo for the deck. I mean, like 3 intimidates attacking for 18. You can just completely wipe someone out who's not prepared for that.
and that's the thing. And particularly in Blitz, you could just play this as a single copy, just another blue card. You can pitch it to play the Alpha Rampage itself if you need to, if you don't have enough resources to pull off the full combo. But yeah, particularly when you think about combining it with cards like Beast Within, for example. So you
Yeah.
draw a card, say you discard something like Beast Within, then you draw another card, you get that Intimidate. Cards like Blood Rush Bellow. If you Blood Rush Bellow, pitch a blue, Blood Rush Bellow, draw 2, follow up with this as well. Just like multiple avenues to intimidate and also buff. So it's it'll be cool to see how this card sort of how players choose to utilize this card in the meta. We could even see we're talking about sort of current builds of the deck as well. We could see players use a card like this to actually fully adapt their builds and change from, particularly in Classic Constructed, change from some of the more grindy mid-range builds to like much more aggressive builds, like some of the ones we've seen in the
Yeah,
past, of course.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I guess because you're right, like this is very kind of YOLO card. Like this card could be great against very grindy control decks. where you can do that burst damage and push past the defense reactions. I mean, basically setting up like a really powerful attack for them to deal with. So,
Absolutely.
and a lot of the time you don't even need to defend against those decks. I mean, it's not a card that you would want to play against aggro decks, but I can see that utility to against the control.
And the cool thing is, as well, like generally for your blues, you want to have your baseline blues. Like it's not cards that you want to be taking out. Like if you have a core foundation of blue cards, say like, whatever number that may be, you kind of want to keep those in against most matchups. But if you're only running one copy against this, you could potentially, take it out against decks such as Katsu, Dorinthia, all these very aggro decks. But I suppose one thing is, we've been talking on and on and on about Reiner, but there's a brand new brute in town.
Yeah, yeah, Livia. From what I've seen, it's quite exciting. I think I'll always have a special place for Reiner. But you're absolutely right. This card is great at interacting with Livia's abilities, which is you kind of need to fill up your graveyard in order to remove cards from a graveyard to put in the banish zone to stop yourself from taking damage from Blood Debt. So that is definitely helping out both of those two heroes. I don't really see it much of a card for KO personally, but definitely for Reina and Levia.
Well, one thing with KO actually is we have to check in how that works because could you potentially like get a double? Oh wait, no, because it's the base power, right? But you could kind of like so
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be like times four, but say you drop your tier limb from limb, you discard a six power card. You play your pack hunt, you roll a six on KO. You're pack hunting for what 18 or something.
I think my favorite for that would be like Wrecker Romp. I reckon this there could be a build where you literally turn one, play out a limb for limb, or maybe it would require some setup. Then you pop a Hudden cross strap, play a Wrecker Romp, roll a six, and attack them for what is it 2024? Yeah, that would be.
You could probably get like
That's
a
like the ultimate KO like jank
you could,
deck,
you could
but I
probably get
love
like
it.
a red barraging in there somewhere. I think I haven't fully done the math, but I think with hard and cross strap you could. So you get out the red
Yeah.
barraging, then you throw down the the wrecker romp for
Once
28.
every 100 games, you like almost kill your opponent on turn one.
You turn up to a skirmish. There's been someone practicing for months, and they see KO. They're like, "All right, sweet, this should be a free one." And then bam, wrecker romp for 24, turn one.
Also, you have to hope that they're also playing Brute and that they're gonna draw like two tier limb from limbs and those other Brute attacks that can't block. 24 damage you can't block.
But I suppose
Yeah,
speaking a
I feel like
little,
that is gonna be the meta.
I suppose
But go
speaking,
on.
yeah, speaking a little more about Levia because it seems this card was, designed that it could fit in other decks, but it seems to potentially have like Levia in mind. The reason I say that
Mm-hmm.
is because Levia seems to be all about from the cards that we've seen spoiled so far. Levia seems to be all about getting these six power cards into your graveyard to pay the
Mm-hmm.
costs of these like for these bonus abilities. So playing
Yeah.
cards that you have to randomly banish cards from your graveyard, and if there's six or more power, you get some sort of bonus effect, or even the hero ability if you. It's like what is it? If you discard a six power, if you have a six power card, or if you
If
discard a
you
six power card,
if you banish a six power card, you turn off the blood debt.
right? So I suppose it's not like a pure interaction right there. But basically, you
Yeah, I mean that is the general engine from what it seems is like you play you get those six power cards to your graveyard, then you use all the cards that put them into your banish zone, which kind of it's kind of like this chain of being able pumping out damage while putting on a lot of pressure and stopping yourself from killing yourself. Which is yeah, it will be interesting how it plays out.
Yeah, it's quite cool because I mean, it sort of brings to mind cards. I feel it's one of those things that I'd jump on a website and start typing in like cards with banish in their name or something, and seeing what comes up, to because I feel like there's a lot of cards now that have more interesting interactions now that you can kind of interact with that banish zone, which previously I'm trying to think of any examples, but I can't think of any examples where cards that are banished you can get them back or you can interact with them in some way. So obviously the whole blood debt thing is a big deal now, and also cards, such as Levia's hero ability. But you start to think, I feel like Beast Within is a prime example of a card that you can throw in Levia to have get off some sort of nonsense, because it seems really, because in Rhino the issue with Beast Within is like it was still a great card. Like I always loved throwing 3 of them into my classic constructed decks because hey, you take a bit of damage, whatever.
You gotta keep it real,
You gotta keep it real. Like, I see people saying like, "Oh, you're gonna pay 3 life to draw a card? That's fine by me," and I say, "That's fine by me too."
Yeah, it does. I feel like you're right in saying that. Brute has always been this. I mean, Reiner has been this hero that has that. You have to risk it. You have to risk it to get the full power kind of thing, and it looks from what I've seen is Levia kind of takes it to the next step. You have to the point that you get all these power-ups and all this, you take even more risks, like with this card here, but you can really power up, and it's like a really just go hard, hit them in the face and hope for the best. Hope to kill your opponent before you kill yourself, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I feel cards like Beast Within it brings in some sort of like cool tensions into like Levia deck building decisions, things like that as well. Because you can kind of think of it in 2 ways. Like Beast Within, I want to banish like as many cards as possible, and then just like I can run them all out if they got blood debt, and it's a great time. So I don't care if I take damage to get that 6 power card, but at the same time, because the way Beast Within works, as soon as you hit that 6 power card, it goes to your hand. So it's not like you're ever banishing 6 power cards off it.
Yeah, it never actually stubs the blood debt, does it? It's kind of like the way it interacts is like you just have to hope to get something useful, like that the Tome of Torment, I guess. That's a pretty cool interaction.
Yeah, because I see it as well that like maybe we'll see people trying to build with like some sort of hybrid between a bunch of a whole bunch of 6 power cards, because you need enough. It's kind of like Rhino and Way. It's based around that 6 power plus mechanic, so you need enough of these to get into your graveyard to pay the additional cost of these like big cards, or get the bonuses, or whatever the option is. But on the side, maybe you want to be playing some of these like blood debt cards, things that like that aren't 6 power, but if they get banished, you can like run a bunch of them out, and that's some sort of side combo with Beast Within. So I'm not,
and I feel like that could be a really interesting kind of like tension in the deck. Being like, do you want to play more 6 power cards, or do you want to play cards that actually kind of interact with the banish zone? And either way you go, finding that balance is going to be quite tricky, I feel.
Yeah, because that's one thing as well, right? Like, I mean, it can be cool getting this value from banishing these blood debt cards, but it's a dead the deck collectors are going to come knocking.
Imagine just drawing like 4 of those, not being able to put anything in your banish zone, and then like being like, okay, I guess I'll do something. I'll play a Tome of Torment, draw a card, and take like a crap load of damage.
But yeah, I think that is going to be pretty cool, and seeing how people, I mean, either way, it just seems like Beast Within just seems like a really good card in Levia now, because in Rhino, like we mentioned before, there was that tension between, like, you always kind of want to discard the Beast Within, like, you reckless swing, discard Beast Within, and you still have a card in hand, or you Blood Rush Bellow, and you get to draw 3 cards effectively. But there's always that issue, like that you Blood Rush Bellow, discard Beast Within, and then like you banish another Blood Rush Bellow and like 3 barraging beatdowns, and you're like, ooh, my win conditions. It's like discard this.
Another barraging, another one.
Yeah, it's like, okay, discard Beast Within. Okay, I banish 5 win conditions, take 5 damage. Like, Or even
Yeah.
that thing like when it gets to late game, how
Or reckless, you're actually banishing the reckless swings, and you're like, okay, well, this is gonna get a bit harder.
or even if if you get quite low on life and then you're like trying to play a reckless swing but you got a beast within in hand, you're like, ooh, this could kill me before it kills them, which is,
You
you
know
know,
something about that, don't you?
yeah, let's not talk about that, but let's just say it gets quite risky. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it'll be real cool, yeah, because like either people can just build these super heavy six power builds, they can go for these mixes, where it doesn't quite have that same tension as Reiner and Levia, because if you're not hitting these six power, ideally you might be hitting these, impactful blood debt cards, things like, Tome of Torment, if you can sort of utilize that with additional action points from Scabskin rolls, things like that,
Hmm.
or you get like time snap potions out to set up. But if there's, I mean, we haven't seen the whole set yet, of course. So if there's like
Yeah.
these impactful blood debt cards that you don't actually mind if you banish a whole bunch of stuff before the six power things, then it's a classic Hannah Montana. You get the best of both worlds. It's it's great. You know, it's
Absolutely. And it just seems like that's where Livia gets her power.
yeah, and I wonder as well.
What are you gonna say?
Just speaking of, because I was speaking about cards that banish, right? And like Beast Within was one of the first ones that come to mind because of that. But you also can see this, like, I suppose we're going a little bit off topic here from the spoiler, but I was going to say, like, you know,
All good.
things like Art of War as well. Whereas like previously the
Hmm.
banishing felt like a cost, but now for heroes like Levia, for
Yeah.
example, that might actually be quite a good thing. Like you might be kind of relying on that Art of War. You got 8 cards of Blood Dead in your graveyard, or your
To
banish zone.
save yourself.
Yeah, and you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
like you're just
Exactly.
Art of Warring to buy yourself one more turn. So I'm really looking forward to like these sort of
Hmm.
interactions. The fact that like the banish zone is another zone that can be interacted with now, like I mentioned before. Um, I don't know. It's just
Hmm.
it's really cool.
I think it does open up the game a little bit because it's a zone that hasn't been used before, and all of a sudden got added to the game, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to how people leverage that. But what I wanted to talk about in terms of Livia or in terms of the kind of cards that there's a lot of also like the new concept of shuffling your graveyard and banishing cards from your graveyard, which I feel it's good to kind of think about it in terms of how it interacts with your equipment. You know, players have memories. Everyone seems to use the sleeves of a different color because it just makes it so easier to kind of de-sleeve your deck after the game and just put all your equipment um, in a separate pile. But it seems like it's going to be a trend of Livia's kind of needing to use the same sleeves for their equipment and their deck, just so to kind of like randomize those graveyard cards face down easier.
Yeah, and that is true because like you're correct. I feel like the majority of players, even at the moment, their equipment might be like if your deck is in blue sleeves, you might have your equipment in red sleeves, and you can see
Mm-hmm.
why people do that as well, right? Because like if you've got in Blitz, we have like 11 equipment slash weapons, even classic constructed, where you can have anywhere from like 4 to 8 pieces of equipment. Like the last thing you want to
Mm-hmm.
do is you're like halfway through a close game and then you draw like a gambler's gloves or something. It's like a warrior player, and you're like,
And your
ooh,
opponent's just like, Judge!
yeah, and 'cause I actually played a skirmish tournament recently where I had all my things in the same sleeves just because I was lazy and didn't sort it out in advance, right?
Yeah,
And it was
yeah.
one of those things between every round. I was just like, okay, like make sure I take out all these, like look through there quickly, like move them off to one side. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that could be. There's also the thing about like graded cards, I suppose, like cards in like those big plastic slabs and everything, interactions with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, true. Yeah.
So
I mean, I feel like there's still a way to randomize it. I don't know whether you would do it on the table or something, but it just seems like it will be a trend for players to just use the same sleeves and just be very mindful of de-sleeving after the game. Just In terms of casual play, anyway.
Yeah, because
But yeah, we'll see how that pans out.
I feel for casual play, it's probably not the biggest deal. I can maybe see even for like one who knows. What I imagine is like a policy will be developed around that, and it'll work out, and everyone will be happy
Yep.
because that's what I like to believe. But I can see something like if you I don't know. I was gonna say. I suppose it's difficult, right? Like because you kind of need. But if there were six cards in your graveyard, you could roll a d6 and be all good. Or if there were exactly 20
Yeah,
cards, you roll a
play the game so
d20.
you always have always have six cards.
Yeah, but I can see the issue with rolling dice is because like say you have 14 cards in your graveyard, you're like, oh, roll a d20, and everything above 15 is a reroll. You know, I kind of know from playing brute and competitive tournaments as well. Like the issue with that, because a common thing you'll see if at the competitive level, I've seen it in like webcam skirmish events and real life events and everything as well, is particularly for heroes like Rhino, when you go to intimidate a card, often the player will place their hand face down and you'll sort of, if you've got a d6, it's like, okay, I'll roll it, label the cards 1 through 4, and then 5 and 6 is a reroll. But the problem is, like, particularly if you're in sort of grindier games as well, if you end up having to reroll sort of 10 to 12 times over the course of a match, that actually starts to take up even if it's sort of 2.5, 3 minutes, particularly with the change to the end of game procedure. There's no 3 extra turns anymore or anything like that. Like, I think it's like 1 extra turn these days. So it's, yeah. But anyway, I'm sure there'll be a solution.
Yeah,
But it's
just
an
get
interesting
like
thing about.
a dice from I don't know, from 3 to, I guess you don't need 3, but from like 4 to 20, and just have like 16 dice.
All I know is
But
that
anyway, we're getting way off topic here.
yeah.
Tier from Len to Len. Great card.
What was that spoiler card again?
So, if you're in a really competitive situation, right, and you have all these equipments,
Equipments. And like somehow like all these equipments are just in the graveyard as well. Which isn't really that common, I feel, anyway. Like I suppose like you can block with someone all that, but yeah.
just use Battle Worn,
Yeah. Yeah, all I can
Never
say is,
pop
if
those gambler's gloves.
if I'm playing Levia, I'm probably not turning up with my gold tunic. Like, sweet. Let's take that out the rapid, chuck it in a sleeve.
Shuffle up your graveyard.
I'm sitting there. But one actually thing, going back to the card, let's get serious from over here. If we, serious faces on. One thing we should point out is because I feel like the wording could potentially confuse players, because it does say, if a card with 6 or more power is discarded this way, the next brute attack action you play this turn gets plus X power, where X is its base power. Now, that actually refers to the card you're playing and not the card you discard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I suppose, I don't know, maybe that's obvious to a lot of people, but I feel like that's something I would get wrong.
No, I had to reread it like 4 times and make sure myself. I kept on thinking, be like, okay, but what if I draw the card I don't want to like get a pump from? And I was just like, wait, okay. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It is really crucial to remember that it's the card that you play gets doubled, which actually makes it, I feel, a lot better, just because it's easier to control in terms of having that card that you want to play in your arsenal. Just makes it a lot easier to pull off.
Yeah, and it is brute attack actions only, so it doesn't work with like Romping Club.
Command and Conquer.
Yeah,
Let's
Command
be
and Conquer is
honest.
the one I think you have, like, yeah, CNC.
Oh yeah, swing CNC for 12. Let's go.
Let's go.
Um,
But the things like,
yeah, but it kind of,
things like
yeah, you
Massacre
go.
as well, it seems like could be pretty cool with.
Yeah, I mean, it'll pump it for 6.
Yeah, it's still like, it's coming in for 14 then with the Massacre bonus.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, what I was also a point I was going to make is the tail limb from limb, when you're pitching it, it can actually be quite a annoying card combination with Reckless Swing, and I think those two cards might be kind of fighting for the same slot.
Oh man, you're
we might
dreaming,
see
reckless
players.
swing.
I mean, in Blitz, people play two reckless swings. Maybe one gets replaced by a TLM from them. In Classic Constructed, I would only run two reckless swings because I did find that with three, I was in a situation where I would draw two reckless at the same time, and throughout the whole game, early, mid, late game, it is quite detrimental. So, I don't know. It could be the card that kind of fights for that spot. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
That's just my take on it.
no, I think that actually is a good point because yeah, like you don't want to be drawing sort of multiple cards that don't really block that well, right? Because like say you draw like reckless swing this and two other cards, then I mean yeah, you can still block for up to like 11, but it's just not really ideal. Particularly like say if you block for three with your first card and you're holding the reckless swing,
Mm-hmm.
like and you know you're playing against a Dorinthia player or whatever, like you block for three and they go like seeing Steelblade into like an Iron Song response, like
Mm-hmm.
when you're when you're sitting there and you've got your reckless swing, your tail limb from limb, and your other card that like blocks a three, like it's a little bit risky, like because you can, you know, if you reckless swing and discard the other card that isn't here from limb from limb, and they come over the top, then you're kind of stuck with like a zero block as your last card in hand, and
Yeah, that's true.
that's just like a minor example. Like, I mean, obviously there's ways to play around that, but like the general point that I kind of agree with as well is that you kind of, yeah, you don't want to get stuck with like these multiple cards in hand that can like reduce the overall block value of your hand.
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be definitely a bit of a disaster if you
Yeah,
draw two limb from limbs or like limb from limb and double reckless, anything like that.
I see that. Like, I think overall, I am gonna be quite excited, and I'm gonna keep an eye on how this card plays out. I mean, obviously, we haven't seen all the. Maybe there's more interaction with kind of in Monarch in terms of Brute and in terms of Levia as well. So I'm really excited to see what comes out and what players are gonna put together.
Oh, true. You just you haven't seen many of the mono cards, eh? This guy, yeah.
From players' perspective, I like to see how people react to spoilers, what they think of the cards. Yeah,
This
I
guy's
mean,
he's a big troll. Nah, but yeah, I mean, I feel that that kind of like covers off most of the things with this card. I mean, it's one of those things again, right? And like early on in spoiler season, it can be hard to assess cards when you don't have like a full context in which they
hmm
operate. You know, for any of our longtime fans, you know, we had our classic Crucible of War spoiler from last season where we got given Heron's Flight, and we were given Heron's Flight without any of the other information around it. So like we were doing all this
yeah,
crazy
I
stuff
went
like
deep. I
what
went deep.
yeah, because all we could see is that like it I think it referred to like Crane Dance as like the precursor to it, but we didn't know what Crane Dance was. Oh wait, no, we didn't even see
Yeah.
Crane Dance, right? Or did we? I'm trying to.
No, we hadn't. Like I thought. I remember just basically googling what crane dance was in terms of the martial arts style, and I was like, "What? It's like a fight, like a punching and kicking technique. It must be some kind of, lick tap. It must be a lick tap line and a head jab line or something like that." So yeah, I went way too deep into the research, and it just turned out to be, I kind of comboed with. So yeah.
Yes, and I suppose like
Oh well.
the point we're sort of trying to make there is that yeah, we had access to the fact that like it comboed off Crane Dance, so we knew there was a card called Crane Dance. We didn't know anything else, so we're trying to like figure out this card in isolation, and we're like could see how it's quite cool talking about certain context, but without like the other information, it's a bit of a guess. We were thinking like, oh, maybe Crane Dance works off like leg tap and head jab and all this cool stuff, and it's a similar thing with this card. Like I feel on paper, it does look like a pretty cool, pretty strong card, pretty exciting as well. Um,
hmm
the fact that it's made like its drawbacks, like the fact that it doesn't block, and the fact that there's that like random discard factor in, so you won't always get it. I mean, that seems
hmm
fair enough because it is a blue card. But I think, like we said right at the start, like the baseline is when you have like blue cards that are majestics that are impactful and do something. Like these are generally pretty exciting because they'll make their way into decks. Like I feel like the gold standard for this would be something like Glint the Quicksilver in Wario, right? Like a blue Majestic, absolute staple. Like does everything you'd potentially want it to. Not
And yeah, the blocks.
Yeah, and in a box. I mean, I'm not quite sure this is like Glint the Quicksilver material. Maybe more. It's more like a Glint the Bronze or something. But like, it's a
Yeah.
Glint the Slow Bronze. But
Yeah.
all right. I
I
guess
mean, yeah, I do like the fact that you can kind of do some kind of build around it. Especially, yeah. Rhina Alpha Rampage. I'm gonna do it, guys. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna next tournament. I'm gonna bust out the tier limb from limb Rhina, bring it back.
yeah. I think basically like bottom line is like testing like any form of brute, whether it be Levy or Rhina, arch release of Monarch. I feel this card is just going to be like automatically placed into builds. Like that doesn't mean it'll necessarily, I don't know. I don't know if it'll ultimately be in the very best of the best tier 1 builds. It depends what your game plan is and everything. But in saying that, I feel it's a card that people will immediately be trying to test sort of like any number from 1 to 3 of, trying to change the way they build their decks a little bit based around it. And I don't know, I feel like ultimately we could see it become like a pretty solid staple. At least I feel I'm gonna go out and say it, like I feel at the very least this card will be like an absolute staple, at least one of, and like many brute
Would
decks.
you say would go out on a limb?
That's a good one.
We need to wrap this
Oh
up.
yeah, how did I miss that? Yeah, I mean, for anyone still listening, we love you. We appreciate you. You've come for the spoiler, and we've proceeded to talk 35 minutes of nonsense about it. But anyway, yeah, I feel like that kind of like wraps up our spoiler, and super excited to see everything else. We're keen to hear what people's reactions are about this card. As we see more and more cards come out, we'll probably see how it interacts with the class a bit better, and yeah, and
And
I
if
guess
you have any cool interactions with the cards, definitely write some comments. I want to see people's take on this card.
yeah, because there's probably things we've missed, in between all our jokes and random theory and talking about graveyards and equipment. We probably missed like some really critical things. So yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to tell us something we've missed, some cool interactions with us, we're keen to hear. And yeah, I think that about wraps things up for this week. And I feel we'll probably be back sometime soon. I don't know, maybe doing a bit of a review of some of the Monarch cards that have been released in the meantime.
Absolutely.
All right, well, cheers for tuning in, everyone. We're sorry we put you through such a long episode for a spoiler card, but we appreciate you all, and we'll catch you next time.